Yeah, dear student, today I'll be taking the relations. First, we'll be taking the relation between APC and APS. APC, you know very well, average propensity to consume, where we establish the relation between total consumption and total income. And in APS, we establish the relation between total saving and total income. What is APC? APC is equal to C by Y and APS is equal to S by Y. Now if I write APC plus APS, what is the value of APC? C by Y plus what is the value of APS? S by Y. If I take the LCM, what is common here? Y, and therefore what will come here? C plus S. What is C plus S? Is equal to income. Consumption plus saving is equal to income. So what will come? C plus S is equal to Y by Y is equal to 1. So what is the relation? APC plus APS is equal to 1, or we can say APS plus APC is equal to 1, or we can say APC is equal to 1 minus APS, or APS is equal to 1 minus APC. Now what possible 1 mark question? You have been given APC 0.4 and you have been asked what is the value of APS. APS is equal to 1 minus APC. What was the APC? 0.4. 1 minus 0.4 equals to 0.6. So this relation is very important, though it is simple. Now moving to the next, relation between MPC and MPS. What is MPC? Ratio between change in consumption due to change in income, and MPS is the ratio between change in saving due to change in income. What is MPC? Delta C by delta Y, and what is MPS? Delta S by delta Y. So if I write MPC plus MPS, here I put the value of MPC. What is that? Delta C by delta Y. And what is the value of MPS? Delta S by delta Y. And if I take the LCM, what is common? Delta Y. So what will come here? Delta C, and here delta S. And what is C plus S? Y. So it will be delta Y by delta Y is equal to 1. So what it means? MPC plus MPS is equal to 1, right? And MPS plus MPC is equal to 1. Or we can say MPC is equal to 1 minus MPS, or MPS is equal to 1 minus MPC. Here also it is used to calculate one of the variable. Either MPC is given, we can call MPS. If MPS is given, we can call MPC. Clear? Now moving to the next. First we started with consumption function in this unit, then saving function. Now relation is done. Now moving to the third variable, which is very important, is investment function. Now what is investment? Investment means if you develop the capital goods, that is called investment. If you put the money, you use the money over the development of capital assets or capital goods, that act is known as investment. Like for an example, construction of road, it is what? Investment. Construction of bridge, what is that? Investment. Construction of buildings, what is that? Investment. So what is investment? It means expenditure made on creation of new assets. If I am making expenditure over the purchase of goods to satisfy human wants, that is called consumption. But if I am making the expenditure, right, over different goods and services for the creation of new assets, and when I am saying new assets means capital goods, that is called investment. So investment means expenditure on goods and services on creation of capital goods or new assets. In other words, investment means addition in capital stock. If you are adding the capital goods, so what is happening to the capital stock? It is going to increase. So whatever increase in the capital stock is called investment, or in other words, investment is also known as capital formation. Now investment is of two types. First is called induced investment. This you will find with the enterprises. There are different enterprises in the economy. You have got private enterprise, you have public enterprise. Now, when they go for investment, what they look into? They look into the income. They look into the expected return. And if they find there is more income, right? Or they look into the rate of interest. If they find there is less rate of interest, so they are getting the benefit, they will go for more investment. So the investment which depends on the level of income. If their increase in income is high, there will be more investment. Like for an example, you have been given choice as an entrepreneur or as an investor where you will put your money, where you will invest your money. Your immediate answer will be the place or the business in which the possibility of income is high. So therefore your investment depends upon the level of income. At the same time, when I am going for the investment, I am not carrying the money from my home. For the investment, from where I am getting the money? From bank. And what I have to pay against that? Rate of interest. So my investment also depends upon rate of interest. If the rate of interest charged by the bank is very high, if the rate of interest charged by the bank is very high, I will go for the less investment because I am not going to get more benefit. If the rate of interest charged by the bank is low, I will go for more investment. So the investment which depends either on level of income or rate of interest, that is called induced investment. An example is investment made by the enterprises. Whenever the enterprises are going for the investment, they look into the income level, what expected returns are there, what expected income is there. At the same time, they look into the rate of interest, and that investment is called induced investment. And how it is related, as I told you, investment and level of income have direct relation. If there is more income earning, more investment will be there. But investment and rate of interest, if the rate of interest is high, the investor will go for the low investment. Investment that would respond to the change in national income or in the rate of interest is called induced investment. But when we develop the induced investment curve, we take level of income, right? So here on x-axis what I have taken income, on y-axis what I have taken investment. And if suppose there is more income, if in any business by making the investment I am getting more income, so I will go for more investment. So what is the relation between investment and income? Direct. That's why your induced investment curve is upward sloping. So what is the relation between income and investment? Direct relation. Income increases, investment also increases. So induced investment curve is upward sloping. So induced investment is what type of investment? Dependent investment. On what it depends? Mainly on income. How it depends? Directly. More income, more investment. Vice versa. Less income, less investment. The second type of investment is autonomous investment. This word already you heard in case of consumption. What we call autonomous means independent, which does not depend. Like for an example, the expenditure in the government budget made by the government. It has nothing to do with income. It has nothing to do with the profit. The government decided and government will go for it. Why? Because it is for the social welfare. Like during the time of recession, when the economy is not doing well, just boosting the morale of the economy, government come forward and make the investment. That investment has nothing to do with income. It is independent investment, and that is called autonomous investment. So what is autonomous investment? Independent investment. If investment does not depend either on income, output or the rate of interest, that such investment is called autonomous investment. Thus autonomous investment is independent. Why? It does not depend either on income, output or rate of interest. It has nothing to do. For an example, investment by general government at the time of recession. If there is a recession, government is going for the investment because enterprises are not going for the investment. During the recession, there is a price fall. So no enterprise will come forward and go for the investment because their investment is what investment? Induced investment. They will only go for the investment when there is a rise in income. In recession, there is no rise in income. So therefore, there will be no induced investment. So then how the job will be created? How the push will be given to the economy? Through the investment by government, and that investment has nothing to do with the income. So what type of investment it is? Independent investment, and anything which is called independent is autonomous. That's why this investment is called autonomous investment. Now if you show it in the form of curve, so what we are saying, whatever the level of income, whether the income is YO or Y0 or Y1, the investment remain constant. That is called autonomous investment. It does not depends upon income. So what is the slope of autonomous investment curve? It is parallel to x-axis, which indicates that whatever the level of income, whether income is Y0 or Y1 or whatever, the investment remain constant. Neither it is going to increase nor it is going to decrease. Why? It has nothing to do with income. On the other hand, the investment which depends upon income, more investment is called induced investment. So it depends upon income. That's why it is called dependent investment, and it has nothing to do with income. That's why it is called independent investment or autonomous investment. Further, investment function, like when we are discussing consumption function, what I told you, function means depends upon. In the consumption depends upon what? Income. That's why C is the function of Y. Saving depends upon income. Now on what investment depends? That talks about investment function. So investment function talks about the factor over which the rate of investment depends. So investment in the economy depends over two factors. So there are two factors over which the investment depends. Number one, rate of interest, and number two, marginal efficiency of investment. Number one, rate of interest, and number two, marginal efficiency of investment. How on rate of interest the investment depends? As I told you, the investor is not going to bring the money in the business from his house. He is going to take the credit from the bank. He is going to borrow the money from the bank. So when the investor is going to bring the money from the bank, borrowing the money from the bank, what the investor is paying against it? Rate of interest. So over that the investment depends. If the rate of investment will be less, the more and more investors will come for the investment. Why? Because for them credit is going to become cheaper. Like for an example, this is the lockdown time. Now if the bank wants that more and more investment should come, if the government wish the more and more investment should come, so what bank RBI will advise the banks to drop or to decrease the rate of interest. If the rate of interest is low, it means credit is cheaper. So more and more enterprises will go for the investment. And if the rate of interest is high, credit is expensive. So what will happen to the investment? There will be less. So what is the relation between a rate of interest and investment? Inverse. Higher the rate of interest, lower the investment. Lower the rate of interest, higher the investment. It refers to the cost of borrowing money or capital. At what cost you get money? At what cost you get capital for investing in the business? That is called rate of interest. If the rate of interest is high, it means the cost of money is more. So there will be less investment, and vice versa. So therefore what we say, there is an inverse relation between investment and rate of interest. Second factor which affects the rate investment is marginal efficiency of investment. Or in some places you will find marginal efficiency of capital. What it means, when you are going for the investment, what are the expected return? What is the expected profit? When you are going for the investment, certainly you look into that after completing the investment, what you are going to get in your hand. That is called expected return. That is called expected profit. And if you feel your expected profit or expected return is more, you will go for more investment. And if you find the expected returns are less, you will go for less investment. Simple. The investors always invest money in that business where the expected return, what we call it, marginal efficiency of investment, is more. And investors always go for the less investment in those areas where the marginal efficiency of investment, or what we call it, expected return, is less. So what is the relation between marginal efficiency of investment and investment? Direct. High marginal efficiency of investment means more expected return, more profit and more investment. This is increasing MEI, so investment also increasing. MEI is decreasing, investment also decreasing. So what is the relation? Direct relation. So there are two factors which affects the investment: rate of interest and marginal efficiency of investment. Here the rate of interest and investment have inverse relation. Here the marginal efficiency of investment and investment have direct relation. Now moving to the next terms, that is called planned or ex-nate saving and planned or ex-nate investment. Now I will explain you in a very simple manner. When we start a session, right? When we start any accounting year, generally it starts from the 1st April. That time, as a, you can say, consumer, I will have a plan that during this year I am going for the savings, this much saving, X, Y, Z. That is the plan of a saver. Right? One who is going for the saving. Same way, the investors is also having a plan. Enterprise is also having a plan. Okay, this year we are going to invest this much over our business. So when the accounting year starts, at the starting point, we have got some desire. Like you can take in other way, simple example, when you start your academic session, now you are in class 12. So what you are having? You are having plan. You are having desire that this much marks I am going to score in the board. So when you desire for, when you plan for, that is called ex-nate. So in the economy, when we talk about how much planned saving is, how much planned investment is, how much planned or desired saving is or desired investment is, that is called planned saving or planned investment or ex-nate saving or ex-nate investment. So here we talk about the saving. When I say planned saving, means what the savers in the economy are intent to save at different level of income during the period is called planned saving. It is also known as desired saving. It means at the initial stage of the economy, what savers are planning or desiring to save in the coming financial year, that is called ex-nate savings. And on the other hand, other group of people, what they are doing, they are making the investment. They also plan, they have also got a desire. So what they desire regarding the investment, what they desire regarding the investment or plan, that is called ex-nate investment. So what the investor in the economy plan or intend to invest at different level of income during the period is called planned or ex-nate investment. It is also known as desired investment. So in the economy, there is two set of people. One who are planning or desiring about savings, and other who are planning or desiring about investment. Right? Now, both set of person is different. Those who are desiring for saving are savers. Those who are desiring or planning for investment are investors. Now the question is whether this planned saving and investment is equal. The answer is may or may not be. Because suppose I am a saver and you are an investor, right? So what I am planning, what I am desiring may be the same what you are planning and desiring. I am planning to save 10 rupees. You may be also planning to invest 10 rupees. Possible. What I think, you may also think. It is not impossible. But at the same time, all the time it will be possible. This is also not there. So what we say? We say that this ex-nate saving or planned saving or desired saving may or may not be equal as they are planned by different set of people. So if the question is planned saving are always equals to planned investment, the answer is no. It may or no, may not. Why? Because saver is a different group and investor is a different group. Those who are doing the saving, they are different. Those who are going for the investment, they are different. So their opinion, their thought process may be the same or may not. That's why we say ex-nate saving and ex-nate investment may or may not be equal as they are planned by the different set of people. Now moving to the ex-post saving and ex-post investment. I gave you the example of your own. When you start your academic session, that time you have got desire that I am going to score this much mark in my boards. That is called plan. That is called desire. But once the board is over and result is announced, then you will get the actual one. What actually you get? That is called ex post. So in the economy, what at the starting of the financial year saver is planning, that is called ex-nate saving. But what at the end of the session, financial year, what actually they were able to save, that is called ex post savings. Same with the investors. At the starting of the financial year, what they are desiring for investment, that is called ex-nate investment. But at the end of the financial year, what actually they are able to say invest, that is called ex post investment. And see here, actual or ex post saving means whatever is left after deducting the consumption. Because at the end of the financial year, you are generated the income, and the part of income you consumed. What remain is the actual saving. Because how we calculate saving? S is equal to Y minus C. Suppose in the economy during the year your total national income is 10 crore. So Y is equal to 10 crore. And out of 10 crore your consumption is 5 crore. So 10 minus 5. How much left? 5 crore. This is the actual saving. So what? After deducting from income, after deducting consumption from the income, left is called actual saving. In other words, the actual saving in the economy during the year is called ex post saving. Sorry, it should be ex post saving. And at the same time, the actual addition in the capital stock. Initially, you plan that this much capital goods you are going to produce. What is that? Ex-nate investment. At the end of the financial year, you will know what is the actual addition in the capital stock. That actual addition is known as ex post investment. And in the economy, how much actual investment you will make? You will make the actual investment equals to actual savings. Because savings are converted into investment. When I am saying savings, that is the savings with the commercial bank. And those savings are converted into credit. And why the credit is taken? For the investment. So how much ex post saving will be there? Equals to how much ex post investment will be there? Equals to ex post saving. एक इकोनॉमी में at the end of the year कितना investment होगा? जितनी savings होगी. So therefore ex post saving is always equals to ex post investment. But ex-nate are not equal because they are made by the different set of people. So this is not equal. This may or may not. But here actual savings are always equals to actual investment. Now few more terms. Unemployment. What is unemployment? Unemployment is defined as a situation where someone is working age is not able to get a job but would like to be in the full-time job. Someone is seeking, someone is looking for job but not getting job. Means he is ready to work but he is not getting work. Well, how you will treat him? Unemployed or unemployment. Or other words, it's a situation in which a person is willing and able to work but he didn't get work. A person is ready to work and he carry the ability also. One is able to work and willing to work, but if doesn't get work, that is called unemployment. Involuntary unemployment. Involuntary unemployment means it occurs when those who are able and willing to work at the prevailing wage rate, they do not get work. So it means they are unemployment not by wish. They are unemployment because on the existing wage rate, the jobs are not available. People are ready to work. They are ready to work on existing wage rate. But if they are not getting work, that is called involuntary unemployment, which is a serious economic crisis for economy. Like for an example, in our country, you will find involuntary unemployment is a serious problem. Here the people are ready to work. They are able to work. They are willing to work on the prevailing wage rate, but they don't get work. So when a person is able and willing to work on the prevailing or existing wage rate, but do not get work, that is called involuntary unemployment. Means they are unemployed not by wish. They are unemployment due to the economic circumstances. Voluntary unemployment. Voluntary means by which a person is not ready to work. Jobs are available, but on the existing wage rate or prevailing wage rate, he is not ready to work. That is called voluntary unemployment. Means the person is unemployed not because of economic system. He or she is unemployed by his or her wish. By wish, if someone is unemployed, that is called voluntary unemployment. When people are not willing to work, although suitable work is available for them. Work is there, jobs are there, but on the existing wage rate or prevailing wage rate, they are not willing to work. What you will call them? Voluntary unemployment. They are unemployed by their wish. Now moving to the next term, that is called full employment. Situation in which every able person who is willing to work at prevailing wage rate is employed. It means all those people who are able, qualified and willing to work, they are having jobs. No one is unemployed. All of them are employed. That is called full employment. In full employment, total labor demand is equal to labor supply. Labor supply means all those who are willing to work, right? Labor demand means they are demanded, right? All are occupied. So if all those who are willing to work and they are employed, that is called full employment. Now I am going to the main part. Now we are going to discuss aggregate demand and aggregate supply, through which we will go for the determination of equilibrium level of income, employment, output. So now we are going to make a detailed study of what is aggregate demand and what is aggregate supply. The meaning of the word aggregate means total. So when I say aggregate demand means total demand, for what? For final goods and services. Why we are talking about final goods and services? Because we are going for the determination of equilibrium level of national income. And when we talk about national income, we only include the value of final goods and services. That's why here in aggregate demand, we are talking about total demand for different final goods and services in an economy during the period of 1 year. When I am going to calculate aggregate demand, what I am going to calculate? The total demand for final goods and services in an economy during the period of 1 year. Why we include the only final goods and services? Because we are going for the determination of national income, right? So when I say total demand for goods and services, like if you come with the example and I say at micro level, your total demand for goods and services is of 100 rupees, right? Your total demand for goods and services is of 100 rupees. It means what? It means that you purchase the goods and services of value rupees 100. Now my question is, how much expenditure made by you? The answer is 100. So in the place of this total demand for different final goods and services, we can also write total expenditure on final goods and services. That is also aggregate demand. Because total demand equals to total expenditure. What you are demanding, same you are spending. If from the market I am demanding the commodity value of rupees 1000, how much I am going to spend? Rupees 1000. So total demand equals to total expenditure. So if I have to calculate aggregate demand, what I have to calculate? Total expenditure on final goods and services during the period of 1 year. Let us go to expenditure method. In expenditure method, what we are doing? In expenditure method, we calculate total expenditure on final goods and services. From there only, we able to address the different components of aggregate demand. What were the components of expenditure method when we are calculating different aggregates of national income? The components of expenditure method, or you can say the component of total expenditure on final goods and services, were private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross domestic capital formation and net export. This is the expenditure on final goods and services with what objective? With the objective of consumption by the private sector. This is the expenditure on final goods and services with the objective of consumption by government sector. This is the expenditure on capital goods by different enterprises. And this is the expenditure on final goods and services by rest of word. This is how we calculate the total expenditure. So these are the components of aggregate demand. Why? Total expenditure is equal to aggregate demand. So if I have to calculate aggregate demand, what I will have to calculate? Private final consumption expenditure, right? That is called C. Government final consumption expenditure, that is called G. Gross domestic capital formation, that is called I. And net export, that is called export minus import. So what is aggregate demand? Aggregate demand is equal to private final consumption expenditure, gross domestic capital formation, government final consumption expenditure plus net export. Why we are able to get these aggregate as a components of aggregate demand? Because aggregate demand means total expenditure, and that we know total expenditure is made on consumption, which is called private final consumption expenditure, and government final consumption expenditure. Expenditure is made on capital goods, that is called gross domestic capital formation, and expenditure is made on final goods and services by rest of world, that is called net export. And if we are going to talk about two sector model, right? If you are talking about two sector model, we have got two sector model, three sector model and four sector model. Two sector means where it is a closed economy and there is only two sector, household and producing sector. That is called two sector model. Three sector model means where government is also participating in production activities. Then how many sectors are there? Government sector, producing sector and household sector. That is called three sector model. Four sector model means open economy, in which government sector is there, private sector, producing sector is there, household sector is there, and one more sector is rest of world, because it's a open economy. It's a four sector. So if we have got private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross domestic capital formation, net export, this is possible in four sector model, open economy. In open economy, AD is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Right? This is your, when I say private final consumption expenditure, that is called private sector, household sector. When I say government final consumption expenditure, that is called government sector. When I say gross domestic capital formation, producing sector. And when I say net export, that is rest of world. How many sectors are there? Four. So this is a four sector model. But if I take only two sector, household sector, what they are doing? They will do consumption, and producing sector, investment. So in that case, AD is equal to C plus I. We are going to study aggregate demand in two sector model. So how we'll calculate aggregate demand? First, what we'll have to calculate? Consumption function. That you have done. You have studied consumption function. And then second, what we'll have to take? Investment. That also you have studied. There is two type of investment, if you remember, autonomous investment and induced investment. Now, how we able to develop aggregate demand? See, first we develop what C, that is called consumption function. What consumption function talks about? Relation between income and consumption. Here we are showing the relation between income and consumption. And what we said earlier is the same we are going to do today also. We are saying as income increases 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. What happens to consumption? Consumption also increases. First thing. Even income is zero. Consumption can't be zero. And what we call to this consumption? Autonomous consumption. Right? And as income increases, consumption also increases. In this consumption, in this 10 consumption at the level of 10 income, 5 is autonomous consumption and rest 5 is induced consumption. So as income increases, consumption also increases. This is clear about the consumption function. Now moving to the investment. Now when we are going for the determination of equilibrium level of income, employment and output, just I will brief you. We are having the theory given by Professor Keyes, and he has given the theory during the time of recession. And as I told you in terms of investment, the induced investment is not made during the time of recession. Which investment is made? Autonomous investment. Because during the recession, there is no profit. there is no income. So no induced investment will be there. There will be only investment made by the government. So as this theory of income employment is given during the time of recession, so that's why here in I, we have not taken induced investment. What we have taken? Autonomous investment. And what is the character of autonomous income or autonomous investment? Whatever the level of income, investment remain constant, because it is independent. It has nothing to do with the income. And that's why, see, even income is zero, government is making the investment because it has nothing to do with income. 5 crore suppose. And whatever the level of income, investment remain constant. So why here investment is constant? Because which investment we have taken? Autonomous investment. And now C plus I is equal to aggregate demand. 5 plus 5, 10. 10 plus 5, 15. 15 plus 5, 20. 20 plus 5, 25. 25 plus 5, 30. 30 plus 5, 35. And 35 plus 5, 40. This is how we make the aggregate demand schedule. Now if you want to convert it into diagram also same. What is aggregate demand? Aggregate demand is made of C and I. What is I? I is autonomous consumption. What is the character of autonomous consumption? Whatever the level of income, investment remain constant. That's why autonomous investment curve is parallel to x-axis. And what is this? This is your consumption function. What is character? Even if income is zero, consumption can't be zero. How much it is? OR. And as income increases, consumption also increases. That's why it is upward sloping. Now you have got C function and you have got investment curve. By adding C plus I, we can get aggregate demand curve. This is your aggregate demand curve. So what in the aggregate demand curve is showing? Even if income is zero, aggregate demand can't be zero. Why? Aggregate demand is made of C. Even income is zero, C can be zero? No. Even income is zero, I can be zero? No. And that's why AD can't be zero. And as income increases, aggregate demand also increases. Why? Aggregate demand is made of C plus I. Out of C and I, who is increasing? C. And that's why aggregate demand is also increasing. And if you look carefully, you'll find the aggregate demand curve is parallel to consumption curve. See here, aggregate demand curve is parallel to consumption curve. Why? Because the difference between AD is made of C and I. So the difference between AD and C is I, and I remain constant. That's why aggregate demand curve is always parallel to consumption curve or consumption function. Again, I am repeating, if you look into the aggregate demand curve, you'll find even income is zero, aggregate demand can't be zero. Why? Because aggregate demand made of C and I. And at zero level of income, neither C can be zero nor I can be zero. And that's why aggregate demand can't be zero. As income increases, aggregate demand also increases. Why? Because aggregate demand is equal to C plus I, and out of these two, C keeps on increasing. That's why AD also increases. Then third thing, the AD and consumption curve both are parallel to each other. Parallel means the difference between the both is same. Why? Because their difference is I, investment, and investment remain constant. That's why AD and C curve are parallel to each other. Now from this AD schedule and AD curve, what are the important observation? Let us look into it. This is very important. First thing is, AD curve is the sum total of consumption and investment. This we have proved. AD, aggregate demand, is made of C and I. Here C plus I, or here C plus I. So AD is the sum total of consumption and investment. Second, I is the investment curve, which is straight line parallel to x-axis. Why? Because it is autonomous investment. So why this I is parallel to x-axis? Because it is autonomous investment. And what is the character of autonomous investment? Whatever the level of income, investment remain constant. That's why it is parallel to x-axis. Then consumption curve is upward sloping. Why? Because there is direct relation between income and consumption. Why it is upward sloping straight line? Because with increase in income, consumption also increases. Then consumption starts from above the horizon, which shows that there is always some minimum level of consumption when even income is zero. The value of consumption at zero level of income is OR in the diagram, or 5 crores in the schedule is termed as autonomous consumption. What he is saying? Even income is zero, consumption can't be zero. What you call to this consumption? OR. In the diagram, how much is it? Is OR. And in the schedule, how much it is? 5 crores. This is called autonomous consumption, and that's why consumption curve never starts from this zero or origin. It starts from any point of y-axis, and as we know, AD is equal to C plus I. That's why AD also starts from any point of y-axis. Then further he is writing AD curve start from above the horizon because AD is the vertical summation. See, these are the two curves. It is a vertical summation of consumption and investment. At zero level of income, aggregate demand can't be zero. Why? Because aggregate demand is C plus I, and at zero level of income, neither C can be zero nor I can be zero. That's why AD can't be zero. So it will start from any point of y-axis. Then further, AD curve has positive slope, which shows as income increases, aggregate demand also increases. It is simple. Even if you look into day-to-day life, if in the economy income is going to increase, people are earning more, their demand for goods and services will be more. So both have direct relation, income and aggregate demand. That's why aggregate demand curve is upward sloping. Then final, AD curve is parallel to consumption curve because the vertical gap between both the curve is autonomous investment, which remain constant. If you look that AD and consumption curve both are parallel to each other, which means that the gap between AD curve and consumption curve is same. Why? Because the difference between these two, AD and consumption curve, is I, and I remain constant. That's why they both are parallel to each other. This is about the aggregate demand curve. Now moving to the second, aggregate supply curve. Aggregate supply means total supply. What we call supply, you might have studied in microeconomics from individual point of view. When we say supply, means flow of goods, flow of final goods. Supply means flow of final goods. When I am saying aggregate supply, means total flow of final goods and services in the economy during the period of 1 year. So in aggregate supply, what we are going to calculate? How much flow of final goods and services during the period of 1 year. And if you just go back and think of national income, how we define national income? What is national income? National income means total flow of final goods and services during the period of 1 year. So is there any difference between the definition of national income and aggregate supply? No. That's why we say aggregate supply is equal to national income. Why? Because aggregate supply means total flow or value of final goods and services, and total flow of final goods and services is called national income. That is called Y. And what we study in national income, Y is equal to C plus S. So that's why AS is equal to C plus S. Again, I am explaining you, aggregate supply means total flow of final goods and services. This is also known as national income. So aggregate supply and national income is same. So in the place of national income, what we can write? Aggregate supply. And we know national income is equal to consumption plus saving. That's why we write aggregate supply is equal to consumption plus saving. So if I have to make the aggregate supply schedule, what I required? Consumption and saving. That we will get from consumption function. Here is your consumption function. Here I have taken income. Here I have taken consumption. What is the behavior of consumption? That already number of times we studied. Income increases, consumption increases. Even income is zero, consumption can't be zero. After a certain level, income becomes more than consumption because economy starts saving. Now from this consumption, what we calculate? Savings. 0 minus 5 minus 5, 10 minus 10, 10, 20 minus 15, 5, 30 minus 20, 10, 40 minus 25, 15, 50 minus 30, 20, 60 minus 35, 25. Now I have got savings, I have got consumption. And what is aggregate supply? Aggregate supply is equal to C plus S. So 5 plus minus 5. How much? 0. 10 plus 0, 10. 15 plus 5, 20. 20 plus 10, 30. 25 plus 10, 15. Sorry, 25 plus 15, 40. 30 plus 20, 50. 35 plus 25, 60. Now I have got, this is your aggregate supply. Right? Right? Now if you draw diagram, it will come like this. Why? Because aggregate supply is equal to Y and Y is equal to C plus S. And you have studied the income curve. Income curve is always upward sloping straight line at 45-degree angle. Same is here. When income is 0, aggregate supply is 0. Even in real life, if suppose there is no income, there is no employment, it means you are not using resource. So when you are not using resource, there will be no income. When there will be no income, from where there will be flow of goods and services. So income is 0, aggregate supply is 0. Same here. Income is 0, aggregate supply is 0. Income is 10, aggregate supply is 10. Why? जितनी आपका flow of goods and services होगा उतनी ही आपकी income होगी. Income is 20, flow of goods and services is 20. Flow of goods and services is 30, income is 30. Both are increasing in the same proportion. That's why aggregate supply curve is always upward sloping straight line at 45-degree angle. Why it starts from origin? Because at 0 level of income means the supply of goods and services is 0. That's why it starts from origin. And both income and aggregate supply increases in same proportion. That's why it is upward sloping straight line at 45-degree angle. What is the behavior or observation about the aggregate supply? AS curve is upward sloping straight line at 45-degree angle. That is done. It starts from 0 because at 0 level of income, flow of goods and services is also 0. AS curve depends upon two factors. अगर आपको flow of goods and services बढ़ाना है, if you have to increase the flow of goods and services in the economy, how it is possible? You will have to make more use of resources. आपको labor बढ़ाना पड़ेगा, आपको capital बढ़ाना पड़ेगा, आपको use of land बढ़ाना पड़ेगा. By this, you can increase the supply of goods and services. So if I have to increase the aggregate supply, then I have to use the resources. So aggregate supply depends upon resources. That is called use of resources means employment. Or how it is possible? By using the advanced technology. I can convert the production from 20 to 40. How? Through the use of advanced technology. So flow of goods and services in the economy or aggregate supply depends upon two factors. Either resources or employment or use of technology. But technology is assumed constant. We assume that technology is constant. So it means aggregate supply depends upon use of resources. It means if you have to increase the aggregate supply, अगर आपको aggregate supply बढ़ानी है तो आपको employment भी बढ़ाना होगा. जितना आप employment बढ़ाओगे, जितना आप resource बढ़ाओगे, उतनी ही aggregate supply बढ़ेगी. So as you increase the resources, the aggregate supply is also going to increase in the same proportion. The point where resources are fully utilized. Now the day will come when all land is used, all labor is used, right? All capital is used. What it means? Resources are fully utilized. Can you increase the aggregate supply after that point? No. After that point, you cannot increase the aggregate supply. Aggregate supply is going to be constant after this point. Again, I am repeating, as you increase the aggregate supply by making the use of resources, then the day will come when no resources left or the resources available to you are utilized. Fully utilize all the resources. When no resources left, from where you will make the flow of goods and services. So what will happen? No change in aggregate supply. So what I am writing, the point where resources are fully utilized means all resources are used. After that point, we will not able to increase aggregate supply. What will happen to the aggregate supply? Suppose this is the resources up to this point. If up to this point resources are there, so your aggregate supply will increase up to here only. After this, aggregate supply cannot go further. It will be constant. Why? Because no resource is left. And what is the only way to increase the aggregate supply? Now use of advanced technology. But what we assume, technology is constant. So it means that if in the economy all the resources are fully utilized, after that we cannot increase the aggregate supply, and that is known as point of full employment, or that is called full employment point. What is full employment point? When in the economy all the resources are fully utilized and further aggregate supply is going to be constant, aggregate supply cannot be increased, that is known as full employment point. Now in the next session we will be directly going for the determination of equilibrium level of income, employment and output through aggregate demand and aggregate supply. In this you're able to understand what is aggregate demand, how we develop a schedule, how we get the aggregate demand curve, what is aggregate supply, how we develop the schedule, and how we develop the aggregate supply curve. So this material you have, and next we'll be working over the determination. Thank you. Thank you.